This is Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. I'm Scott Bertrand, and with me is State Senator Mike Shirkey, the Senate Majority Leader. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Yeah, you're welcome, Scott. Good to be with you again.
And he is representing the 16th State Senate District as well. That's Branch, Hillsdale, and Jackson counties. You can find him online at senatormikeshirkey.com or go to Facebook and search for Senator Mike Shirkey. We are not at a loss of topics for our conversation this time, Senator, with the state of the state, with the budget. But first, head to something that was covered or mentioned in the state of the state, but actually was also released beforehand. That is the governor's plan to bond out to pay for road construction and renovations across the state. This is something that actually you have no say in. Voters directly have no say in because a state panel makes the final decision here. Tell us what happened, and this is essentially a done deal, right?
As it stands today, you are correct in your assessment that it's a done deal. I can tell you this, that I talked personally with the commission responsible for making such actions and approving such moves, and this was not on their radar screen. It was not a recommendation by them. This is strictly, in my opinion, a bold, misguided political move. And even in the words of our governor in State of the State, and subsequent to that, she expresses her frustration and says she's going to go it alone, quote unquote, and the legislature has never been serious. All of those things are false. We have provided in many different options that would get her close to what she wanted to net out of her $2.5 billion tax increase. But she didn't like them, so therefore, instead of saying we disagree on policy, she just says we weren't serious, and that just sends a disingenuous message to the rest of the state. The fact that she boldly just stands up and says, I'll go it alone, also should tell people plenty about her ability to navigate and lead a discussion within the legislature. Nobody disagrees that we have to find additional sustained funding for infrastructure and roads, but nobody, at least that I'm aware of, agrees that it's necessary to raise ridiculous amounts of taxes to do so. There is a bright spot here. I can tie it into the budget. At least she is honoring my request to keep road funding separate from the budget, and we'll be working on them separately. And so there's an acknowledgement there that she's interested in not repeating the same debacle that we experienced last year in the budget process. So, but bonding is a legitimate asset management tool, and it's something that should just organically occur based on the finance folks that are running those kinds of investments. It shouldn't be used as a political toy or a political ploy, excuse me. And that's precisely how it's being used. So, this just reveals more and more the differences in policy, politics, and leadership styles. And so people can make their own conclusions.
Senator, if you borrow money, you do have to pay it back at some time down the road. Did the governor identify the funding mechanism to pay for this bonding down the road?
Yeah, it'll come out of our maintenance accounts that we use to repair roads today. That's the irony of this, is that my biggest fear is her words are duping the citizens of Michigan into thinking this is some kind of free lunch. And the facts are that after about 4 or 5 years, because that'll take that much time to feather in the bonding and deploy it. After that period of time, we'll be taking somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $250 million per year out of the fund that we use to repair and maintain roads just to service the debt. If we had a revenue stream identified for it, it's a different matter. But as you know, right now we don't, and so that's kind of where it stands. And I think it's, again, my job is to not necessarily denigrate the use of a legitimate capital asset management tool, but to strongly question the use of it as a political measure just to get somebody to raise, dramatically raise taxes.
State Senator Mike Shirkey with us here, Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. This bonding was mentioned in the State of the State address from a little bit ago. Other things inside that speech from Governor Whitmer, she called for some Obamacare provisions to be enshrined into state law. So if something were to happen at the federal level, you'd still have those things here in the state of Michigan. What was she looking to do? What are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, we need to see the details of what her expectations are. I know one thing she referred to specifically was pre-existing conditions. I've spent most of my career, my short career in the legislature, associated closely with the healthcare industry. And even though there are some occurrences where people with pre-existing conditions have a challenge getting insurance, it's not the norm. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we need to feel like we have to go fix because it's not a ubiquitous problem that she tends to maintain. This is all about, again, another political move in the budget process that we're going to have to push back on a little bit. But I will reserve comment on the entirety of it until we see the details of what kinds of things she wants to enshrine in Michigan law. My guess is we won't find too many things that we conclude or make that necessary.
This is perhaps a small thing from the state of the state, but something I've had my eye on for some years now. The governor called for the state to join 16 other states that have passed hands-free laws to keep, she said, our roads and our kids safe. Senator, there's been a lot of research on this, and the research essentially says that hands-free laws don't necessarily make the roads safer. You're still distracted, whether it's something in your hand or something that's in your ear. The distraction level remains the same. I'm not sure this would have the effect that some think it would.
This falls in the category. You and I have talked about this plenty of times before, but I'm going to keep beating this drum. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, and just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good. This is one of those feel-good kind of things that people are sitting around a town hall meeting, you make your case and people start nodding their heads. They're getting, again, duped into thinking that another law will somehow change behaviors. Mm-hmm. And I don't buy that. I don't believe that. We also have a pretty strong evidence going on right now that there's some folks on that side of the aisle who want to increase penalties for certain crimes and so forth. And again, continuing to do that does not change, does not move the needle. And so we don't need more laws on the books. We just need people to follow the laws we got in law enforcement. Now, I will engage with the law enforcement and ask them what can we do to help strengthen their ability.
Right.
To mitigate distracted driving. I'll be happy to listen to them, but just to put another law on the books that basically is already covered, I see a little value in doing that.
And then, Senator, we get to the governor's 2021 budget plan released just a couple of days ago. In it, we see her ask for an increase in education funding. Does the state of Michigan have an education funding problem? Does it have more of an issue about how that funding is being allocated across the state? What's the best way to attack this issue?
I think it's all of the above. I do think we may be a few generations behind in the evolution of how we fund schools, particularly recognizing those that have disproportionate amounts of troubled or underprivileged kids. But I don't think the total dollars we have available for funding is inadequate. And I also believe that, we have a shrinking population of kids mm-hmm. that it also contributes to the, here's the bottom line. When we were growing and, there was each year we had a few more kids in each, across the state in schools, there was we got lulled to sleep thinking that the funding formula was enough to continue to cover what I call fixed expenses that have nothing to do with how many students are in the building. Well, when you're in a shrinking environment and the number of students starts to shrink, the total funding does the same, and what happens then is that you start getting squeezed on what I call your fixed cost. We mm-hmm. probably have too many school districts in Michigan, but that is a multi-year process to create incentives for schools to recognize that, and we have to provide some tools so that they have the ability to reconcile their differences in debts and reconcile their differences in contracts to allow them to actually come together. And I think that's where the greatest value might come from in terms of long-term education financing reform.
State Senator Mike Shirkey, final question for you. We'll dig further into the budget process in our future conversations, of course, but as we sort of had this first attempt by the governor to lay out her priorities, do you feel that there will be any continued fallout, any bad feelings from that budget fight toward the tail end of 2019 moving forward into this 2021 discussion?
No, I'm a little more optimistic than I was last year. First of all, we signed into law. The House and the Senate agreed with the governor, and we put into new law that says the legislature shall deliver a negotiated budget to a governor by July 1st of every year. I'm fine with that statutory requirement. It does lay out some expectations on behavior of the parties involved, and the fact that so far, her budget presentation did not include any new tax increase, and B, where she is following our lead in keeping the roads conversation separate from the budget, I think we can navigate this. Now, there's plenty of differences, but with those two variables removed, I think we can probably navigate this one a little differently than we did last year.
All right, State Senator Mike Shirkey, representing Branch, Hillsdale, and Jackson counties, the 16th State Senate District. Find him at senatormikeshirkey.com or head to Facebook and look for Senator Mike Shirkey. Senator, thanks as always for joining us.
You're welcome, sir. Have a great week.